Hey everyone, Ridden here, thank you for coming. And tonight we're going to be taking a deeper look at episode 5 of season 1 of Marvel Studios' WandaVision. Welcome back everyone. We have so much to unpack and uncover after watching the latest episode of WandaVision. So let's get right down to it.
Previously on WandaVision.
Coming into this week's episode, my expectation levels were very high, particularly considering the additional context we were given surrounding the Monica Rambeau and Director Hayward characters, as well as the return of Ant-Man's Jimmy Woo and Thor's Darcy Lewis. All week long, YouTube and other platforms have been jam-packed with all of these speculative theories as to what could be going on and who is behind it all, and questions on top of questions, all of which we just simply don't have any definitive answers for yet, which is the beauty of the show, in that we're hanging off the edge of our seats weekly waiting for more. As to be expected, this week's episode begins with Wanda and Vision in the early stages of parenthood, nursing along young Billy and Tommy in all of their rebellious, ceaseless crying. We've now entered the 80s, it would seem, so the fashion and decor of our characters and settings have been updated to match, and our aspect ratio is noticeably fuller than what we've had in prior presentations of the show. While Wanda is seen to be struggling with Tommy, Vision appears with Billy, stating how it would seem the reading of Charles Darwin's The Descent of Man made him cry even harder. This is a subtle nod to a text that, among many other topics, delved into the relevance of the evolutionary theory to society, something our show does quite a bit itself, seeing as we're watching a mother and synthezoid try to calm their children, who later we see have the ability to self-evolve as they see fit. Interestingly, Wanda fails at this point in an attempt to use her magic on the kids to put them to sleep. I found this to be a very key scene, as it's one of our first instances where something takes place in Westview in opposition to the will of Wanda, which becomes the seed that many questions can start to bloom from, such as, is it the kids? Are they possibly imperceptible to her powers? And if they are, why isn't Vision? And does this mean she isn't in control as they led us to believe last week? As stated flat out later by Agnes, you can't control the children. Is this the reason why there are no other children in Westview? And almost as if on some sort of weird eerie cue, upon Wanda saying to Vision that maybe they need some help, Agnes appears in a full 80s aerobic leotard getup with just what they need: lavender and a bit of Auntie Agnes baby wisdom. The show takes a very serious turn at this point, and we start to see a bit more of the true dark nature underneath, as during an interruption in their dialogue, Agnes completely breaks character and asks Wanda if she would like her to redo the scene over, just taking it from the top. And all of this takes place in front of Vision, who has been growing more and more suspicious of the activities going on around him. And although Wanda feigns ignorance to him of any odd behavior, we can all see the subtle cracking of the facade. In another unexpected turn of events, Vision and Wanda return to the baby's cribs, only to be greeted by their emptiness, and then turn around to fully aged up kids, now walking and talking. And oddly enough, this all takes place in front of Agnes, who again, it doesn't seem to shock or bewilder in any way. If none of the episodes before had done so, episode 5 further laid the groundwork for Agnes to possibly be the MCU's take on the comics character of Agatha Harkness, a powerful witch with a written shared history with both Wanda and Mephisto. As in the beginning, she is privy, it seems, to all the weird things that take place throughout this episode, as well as since the show has started. And her sitting on the veranda before the theme track starts, observing it all, in my mind, seemed very illustrative of her possible hand in all of this. In the case of the children aging themselves up throughout the episode, we have to ponder on whether or not if they both have the ability to do so, or if Billy, who in the comics becomes Wiccan with powers similar to those of his mother, is doing it himself. Throughout the episode and their varying ages, it is also key to point out that their outfits stay very true to their respective comic color schemes. So we got a new theme song and video track, both of which have very strong 80s vibes to them, and even a bit of the 90s, honestly, as there were a few scenes that jumped out to me as very reminiscent of Full House, which I can fully believe is intentional on behalf of the showrunners and Elizabeth Olsen. As we all know, Full House was the acting debut of her sisters Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen as Michelle Tanner. The interesting part about the opening for me was how it was symbolic of the reality of which we've been given, as we see a family photo of Wanda, Vision, and the twins being colored in by a brush wielded by Wanda's magic, which is a one-to-one description of what has taken place in Westview, with Wanda creating the life for her and Vision that she desired, bringing both the children and Vision to be by any means necessary. And then we're treated with childhood photos of both Wanda and Vision, the latter of which had me dying. As we all know Vision's origins, and they definitely don't have him in any cradles or classrooms as baby Viz. But as the theme song says, the entirety of the reality of the show is being made up as they go along. So it makes sense that our title screen here will show only positive moments from both Wanda and Vision's past, even if they aren't necessarily real, as we even get a photo of young Wanda from what looks like the downtrodden backdrop of Sokovia sans Pietro. So we return to Monica on the outside of the anomaly. She's been tested and questioned about her time on the inside, as we could assume would be the case. We should note that it is made a point that her test results all come back blank and inconclusive, which could have further implications down the road. In the comics, Monica has several monikers she goes by, the first of which being donning the title of Captain Marvel, for which she is the first, even before Carol Danvers, who's played by Brie Larson in the MCU, whom we saw interacting with a younger Monica in her film. So the premise of Monica possibly getting powers here in the show isn't far-fetched at all. Monica goes on to comment about how when she was inside of Westview, she heard Wanda in her head, and that she was weighed down with a hopeless feeling that kept her down whenever she tried to resist, that felt like drowning, that being grief. We can see from the outset that the trio of Wu, Darcy, and Monica will most likely be our points of focus on the outside. And I must make the comment that I do in fact love the chemistry the trio displays. During the sword briefing, headed by Hayward, it's fairly obvious that battle lines have begun to be drawn and that Hayward clearly sees and wants to label Wanda as the villain, or in his words, the principal victimizer, and that Wu and Darcy and Monica clearly want the opposite. We also get to see more footage from prior trailers, as Hayward shares footage of Wanda breaking into the Sword headquarters days prior to retrieve Vision's dead body. It was here that I started to create a theory in my head that I will share with you a bit later on. But did you notice here that it seems Vision's body was dismembered and possibly being studied and dismantled for parts? Wu makes the statement to the team that Vision didn't want to be used as a weapon, and as part of his living will, he didn't want to be revived. Is this finally our answer as to why the Avengers didn't bring him back in Endgame? We also must acknowledge that this episode and exchange between Wu and Hayward confirmed that Wanda has in fact never been called Scarlet Witch within the MCU. The closest we've gotten is Tony calling her a witch in Age of Ultron. The motivation behind this particular decision could be one we have yet to find out, or maybe just an attempt to humanize Wanda before her ultimate motivations and future character defining moments take place. Regardless, leaving this briefing, we are well aware of who wants to help Wanda and just get to the bottom of what's going on here, and who wants to possibly do away with her. Bouncing back to Westview, Tommy and Billy have found a dog, one that just magically appeared in their backyard at that, and upon being discovered by Wanda and then Vision, we're given another peek under the hood when Agnes arrives just in the nick of time with a doghouse, because she saw the pooch from her kitchen window. Vision again begins to question how overtly convenient it all is, and when Wanda creates a dog tag for Sparky, Vision is bothered by how she openly does so right in front of Agnes. Wanda and Vision then tell the twins they can't have a dog until they're 10 years old, setting off another spontaneous aging up from the boys after they share a mischievous grin, going from 5 to 10 in a matter of seconds. Returning to the response base, Monica, Darcy, and Wu are working on figuring out how to get Monica back into the anomaly. And while making their way through many theories on how to do so, we get another interesting call out by Monica, where she says she knows an aeronautical engineer who would love this. A statement that has created a bit of a fever pitch among the fandom, as everyone wants to know who she could possibly be talking about. Could Monica be talking about Reed Richards, a scientist and inventor who in the comics is considered to be the smartest man in the world, who also happens to be Mr. Fantastic and the leader of the Fantastic Four, Marvel's first family whom we've all been dying to see make their debut in the MCU? We've already seen cosmic radiation mentioned in the show, that being the source of the Fantastic Four's powers as they were all hit with it in space. Or, on another hand, what if she's talking about Riri Williams, another of Marvel Comics canon's skilled inventors and engineers with super genius level intellect? She's actually already been cast for the anticipated Disney Plus TV show Ironheart, which will be played by If Beale Street Could Talk's leading lady, Dominique Thorne. So maybe her appearing here on WandaVision is more likely than Richards. Another hint which may shed some more light on this is that when the scene takes place, the Spanish subtitles actually indicate that it's a female engineer, which takes Reed out of the possibility equation. On a side note, how awesome is Agent Wu for finally getting Darcy that coffee she's been asking for? Continuing, we get another moment following this that just proves to me that everybody working on the show is just as much a fanboy or fangirl as the rest of us when they start discussing the magnitude of Wanda's powers. Wu asks Darcy and Monica if they have yet to identify the miners, to which Monica responds that they belong to Wanda and that everything in Westview is real. Wu and Darcy struggle with this as they acknowledge Wanda's powers to be those of altering perception and making people see and believe things that aren't there, and that for everything to be real in Westview would show a level to Wanda's powers that hasn't been seen yet from her prior. Monica then points out to them that had she not been interrupted by the blitz he called into play, Wanda could have taken out Thanos in Endgame, a feat that no one else came close to doing. To which Wu responds, well, Captain Marvel did, a statement that elicits a not so subtle disregarding vibe from Monica. Unpacking all of this, it was so cool to actually see characters within the MCU discuss events from Endgame, particularly two of the encounters from the film that sparked the most debate amongst fans, as everyone wanted to know what it meant that both Scarlet Witch and Captain Marvel seemed to both have the upper hand against Thanos. And what does this mean for their respective established power levels in the MCU? And furthermore, what is the tension we sense from Monica towards Captain Marvel? I suspect we won't get the answer to that question anytime soon. Maybe not even until the next Captain Marvel movie. We then get the discovery by Monica through a gun-tested experiment of her wardrobe from the 70s she was blasted out of Westview in, that Wanda is actually rewriting reality, as analysis of her pants deemed them to be made out of Kevlar, from the bulletproof vest she was wearing when she was sucked into the town, bringing forth the question and possibly the answer to the conundrum that we were discussing earlier, being, what happens when you send something into the anomaly that doesn't need to change? We continue to see Vision back at work in an office that has been updated with tech from the 80s, as Norm geeks out at his new computer. Here we finally see Vision get to a point of complete rebellion, as he uncovers Norm's suppressed identity after everyone in the office receives a top secret Sword Communicate transmission from Darcy, describing her findings on the Maximoff anomaly. Norm, once unburdened by his trance, begins to freak out and begs Vision to stop her and to help him so he can get back to his family. He's in so much visible pain that Vision places him back into his Westview persona. Everyone seems to be of the opinion that by her, Norm means Wanda, but I believe there's a possibility Norm could also be talking about Agnes. Here, Norm also lands possibly one of the most meta lines of the show when he tells Vision,
"It's a joke. Can't you tell? None of it is real."
Which I'm sure means just as much to Vision as it does to us in terms of being more of an indication of what's going on and not just a comment Norm is making about the Darcy email. The twins also, on more than one occasion, have displayed their ability to see things as they really are and seem to be acutely aware of everything that's going on, obviously catching Wanda off guard as she herself may not have been expecting them to be so. In the instances of her telling the twin that their dad is at work and the kids saying, "But why? It's a Saturday," we saw Wanda scramble to make sense of it all to them, something that in my mind she might not have to do if she were in control of everything as we're being led to believe. Something else to note is that when she's asked by the twins if she has a brother, she says she does, in present tense, in a complete 180 turn from what she told Geraldine recently, acknowledging that Pietro was dead. The parental sit down she has with the boys where she begins to explain to them why certain things have to be the way they are is then interrupted by the Monica piloted 80s tech drone Sword has decided to send in order to get visuals on Wanda, which doesn't end well at all for the drone. Unbeknownst to Monica, Hayward and his team armed the drone with a missile that they used to take a shot at Wanda, prompting her to then pull up on them at the anomaly's perimeter. This scene in particular was very crucial and deeply layered to me, as when Wanda appears with the dismantled drone throbbing with her energy, her Sokovian accent has returned, whether it be due to her heightened emotions or her no longer deciding to mask it. Here she engages with both high-ranking sword officials, and when Monica steps forward, I couldn't discern if Wanda's reaction to her was one of anger or betrayal, and when she addresses Hayward, she does so in a manner that to me seemed as if there was something deeper to her disdain for him, as she responds to Monica's question for what it is she wants by saying she has what she wants and no one will ever take it from her again. And as if to finger point who tried to do it in the first place, she trains all of Hayward's men's weapons onto him before she departs. And when Hayward says the missile was just a precaution and that she can hardly blame them, Wanda says flatly, "Oh, I think I can." It is here I must share with you my theory that the ultimate big bad of WandaVision Season 1 may in fact be the director. As this episode put on full display, he seems to be dead set on making Wanda the villain of this entire debacle. And returning to the significance of the hexagonal shapes we've seen throughout the series thus far, the only place we've seen it appear outside of the anomaly is in Hayward's office during his conversation with Monica. I would not be surprised if in the end, Hayward ends up being in league with Agnes, possibly even being her husband Ralph, and on a larger scale, Mephisto himself. You heard it here first. Or 12th.
Oh.
Now, what did you think about the leading paper towel brand Logos? I don't know about you, but the commercial we got this week was inherently darker than all of the others we've seen, with the only comparable one being the non-stop beeping of the Stark toaster, which was a direct reference to the bomb Pietro and Wanda stared down in the rubble of their home during the bombings in their youth. We all know what took place in Logos in the beginning of Captain America Civil War, and how heavily it weighed on the psyche of Wanda. So the red liquid here being mopped up repeatedly in the tagline Logos for when you make a mess you didn't mean to is a direct subconscious callback to the blood spilled and innocent lives lost in the accidental explosion Wanda was trying to clear from the crowded streets of Logos that kicked off the abrupt split of the Avengers. And as I'm sure you've taken notice at this point, thus far we have seen the same recurring actors in all of the commercials, whom I now believe to be Wanda and Pietro's parents. Would you agree? So somehow Sparky goes missing, and as Wanda and the twins search the neighborhood for him, they pass the mailman we've seen a few times before, and he says something very revealing to the kids, that they shouldn't worry as their mother won't let Sparky get too far. Last week I spoke about the red herring at the end of episode 4, where it seemed as if the showrunners really wanted the audience to believe and get the lasting impression that it is in fact Wanda that's in control, a trend they continued this week into episode 5, as at every available opportunity they continue to lay the breadcrumbs to that end. Remember this mailman though, because I believe we'll be seeing him again. In a sad twist, we then discover Agnes rummaging around in her bushes, finally revealing Sparky all wrapped up because he unfortunately died after eating too many of her azaleas. This to me is another bit of proof that maybe it isn't Wanda after all that's doing all of this, as this is the last thing I would imagine she would allow to happen to the family dog. And from her bewildered response, we can tell she too believes that something could possibly be afoul. There is also the possibility that her subconscious did this, as we know her and Pietro's parents did die when they were 10. So maybe her mind did this to the boys and the dog unknowingly. The boys, after hearing the bad news, look at each other in confirmation as if to signal another aging up, before being stopped by Wanda, who tells them that although the urge to run away from your emotions is powerful, you can't. Your emotions, they happen. The twins also let on again that they know what their mom is capable of, telling her that she can fix anything, so fix the dead. This scene as a whole really begins to shift the latter half of the episode into another gear that will culminate ultimately later in the home. The addition of Agnes's reaction and eventually Vision appearing really makes this scene powerful, as although Wanda acknowledges to the children that death cannot be reversed and aging up because it's convenient isn't the right thing to do, here we are in Westview. In the episode's final scene, we finally reach the boiling over point it seems Vision had been working himself up to, when he confronts Wanda about what all is going on in an argument that begins in the kitchen and eventually spills over into the living room. There are so many aspects to this scene that caught my eye. After Vision tells Wanda about his interaction with Norm and makes her aware that he knows she changes everything again overnight, she continues to feign ignorance until Vision buckles down. I can honestly say I was very surprised by the sheer anger and emotion Vision displayed here. Vision tells Wanda that she can't control him the way she controls everyone else, to which Wanda responds simply, "Can I?" Something Vision himself doesn't yet know the deeper meaning behind. This was such a cool moment to me, as again we see things begin to barrel out of control and past Wanda's reach as Vision bursts through the kitchen door and abruptly ends the credits, shifting back to his real form. I like that the show itself has Vision acknowledge to Wanda that maybe this was all subconscious at first and that maybe she just only recently became aware of it. The standoff between the two was significantly more intense than I would have believed it could be, had anyone even thought to give me the scene by scene rundown before I saw it. And for the first time in Westview, we see Wanda and Vision at visible odds within their home and within their relationship. I really like the emotion that has been allowed for Vision to show, even giving him the space to admit that he's afraid, as he doesn't remember anything before the reality he's in now. I believe that in this scene, when Wanda tells Vision she doesn't know how any of this started in the first place, that she is in fact telling the truth, and that at some point we will get an episode similar to the one that introduced Monica that will take us back and show us how all of this came to be, free of her will and hand in it. All of this just creates more questions for us, as from the trailer footage we see that the couple continues to exist within Westview. So how does that happen now that Vision knows it's all a ruse? And as he asks, why aren't there any other children in Westview? Is it because they can't be controlled, as this episode has shown? And how will Wanda process Vision's rebellion? And before we could even begin to form those questions and be saddened by having to wait another week for those answers, there's a knock at the door. One that we can see visually deflates Vision, as he believes it's just Wanda deflecting again. In a moment that both elated and bewildered Marvel fans worldwide, Wanda opens the door with the overview from Darcy watching through the screen at the response base to reveal an individual at her door with silver hair. Before the reveal of who it was, I was already screaming, as I was one of the people that thoroughly enjoyed Aaron Taylor Johnson's Quicksilver in Avengers Age of Ultron, and wished he'd been given more screen time, so I must admit, I did come into this show hoping that we would see him again so that he could do so. Wanda gasping, the screen turns and we see none other than Evan Peters standing in the doorway with a biker jacket on. And I, like assumedly everyone else, lost it. I was probably even more confused in this moment than Vision, who asked Wanda who this is. The implications of Evan Peters being on the screen started running through my head a mile a second. And the fact that Darcy then acknowledged that Wanda had recast Pietro only made it worse. We've been waiting a long time for Marvel to finally begin to integrate their newly acquired X-Men property into the MCU. And this is the first time we've ever even had a chance of that taking place. Is this Fox's Quicksilver, now pulled into the MCU across the multiverse by Wanda's powers? And since we're in the 80s, is this the older Quicksilver from the version we saw in Days of Future Past in 1973 that Wolverine said he knew? Remember earlier I mentioned how it was a bit off that Wanda went from telling Monica her brother was dead last episode to telling the kids this episode that he was alive and just far away. From the looks of it, this Quicksilver is even wittier than any we've seen before, calling Vision a popsicle. In another Full House reference, what would be cooler than Quicksilver being WandaVision's Uncle Jesse? This week's episode shattered expectations and again put us in a place of complete astonishment with the direction the show has chosen to take. With Vision being completely self-aware now and the battle lines beginning to be drawn on the outside of the response base, not forgetting to mention the sudden appearance of Wanda's brother Pietro, who, as Darcy so elegantly put, has been recast as possibly the Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men franchise, there's just so much that we still don't know as to what we can expect next. I will of course be continuing to cover the show here weekly on my channel, and if you feel so inclined, I would love to have you here back next week to continue to cover it with us. Again, guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and click that bell for notifications if you've enjoyed our content here tonight. Jump down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. And while you're at it, be sure to check out some of the other content here on the channel. All of the necessary links are listed here below for you to keep up with the coming content and shareables. Please be sure to follow me on all social media platforms. Or just the one you use most frequently. We are slowly but surely building a community here, and I would personally love for you to be a part of that. And last but not least, we have a merch store. So whether you see something you like or just simply want to support the channel, head on over to our shop and grab something, or grab everything. But again, thank you so much, guys and gals, for visiting here with us today. I really appreciate each and every viewing minute of your time you've given us. There's loads of content we'll be sending your way, so I'll be seeing you. But for now, be blessed. And it was written.
Across the nighttime, the city sleep inside. Yeah, hear her voice, shake my window, sweet seducing.